Hello everyone, my name is Crazy Caleb, and welcome to Buttonwords. This module is a big button, which has a big button case, and it has a series of different buttons with different labels on it. So this is a vanilla swirl series that we released a couple months back, I believe in June, and this is a combination of the button and password. So what we're going to look on here is we're going to have a series of 9 different letters, and there's going to be different colored buttons. We're going to try and find a password from this list here, and there's then going to be 4 letters, 4 buttons that we're not going to be using, and we're going to try that are not used in the password, and therefore we're going to try and figure out when to hold and release specific buttons. So let's take a look here. So our first goal is to find a 5-letter word that uses 5 of these letters here, and the best way to do this is simply just Control F and start looking up each of the different letters. So I'm going to start with the Quebec because that's a pretty easy one to find. And let's see if we can find out our word here. Now the word will not be in reading order. It will be all over the place and scrambled. But you should be able to find a word. And I believe that they're all going to be unique letters, from what I understand. There should not be any duplicate letter words that appear in this table. So let's see here. Peak, Kibla, Qubit, Query, Quick, and Quota. So it's not Quebec. Let's take a look at a kilo, for example. Chalk actually is our word here. As we can see, we can spell out C-H-A-L-K with chalk. So therefore, chalk is our word. So these 5 buttons that we have here, we are going to ignore those buttons. So we're going to be holding and releasing R, S, D, and Q. Okay. So we found this one combination of letters. The remaining 4 buttons must be held and released at specific points in time. And these little LEDs off to the side will let you know how many you've done successfully. This little strip also will determine a color that you will see on the display, and that will determine some of the rules that you have to apply. So let's take a look. The remaining 4 buttons must be held for each refer to the list of rules that correspond to its color. So this is referring to the color of the button when we try and hold it. So let's take a look at the rest of this manual, because this is probably where things get a little bit weird. So just bear this in mind, and let's have a look here. So what we're going to do is each of these represent different rule lists. So this first one is red, this second one is yellow, this is blue, and then this is white. All 4 colors of the buttons that can appear. So this top right Romeo is a red button. We're going to take a look at this list here, and we're going to go through all 4 conditions and see which ones apply and which ones don't. So let's take a look here. So the label or any adjacent label is a vowel. And we need to note down what adjacent means. If we look down here at the bottom, adjacent buttons do not include diagonals. So in this case, and it doesn't loop around either, it's going to be left and down from this position, so the A and the L. Now in this case, the label or an adjacent label, in this case the alpha, is a vowel, so therefore this one returns true. Next up, label occurs either earlier or later than all adjacent labels. What exactly does this mean? So this current label, Romeo, it needs to occur either before or after all of the adjacent labels, and in which case it does. It comes after both Alpha and Lima, so therefore this one is true as well. The label is within 6 letters of the first letter of the serial number. Let's find out. It is not within 6 letters of the first letter of the serial number. Charlie is way far off from Romeo. It's much, much further than 6. And the serial number contains the last digit of the label's alphabetic position. So Romeo is an 18 for the alphabetic position. Does it contain the last digit of its alphabetic position? In this case, the 8. It does indeed. So therefore, this rule returns true. Okay, so with this information, what exactly do we do with this? So we have 3 rules that return true and 1 that returns false. And now what we need to do is we need to look at this releasing a held button case. We're gonna when we hold down the button at any time, we can hold down the button any time that we want to. It's gonna have a color that will appear here. If the strip color matches the cell of the table below, immediately release the button. So let's take a look at this table first. So the last digit of the serial number is our column, which is an 8, And over here on the left, it refers to the broken rules. This means that these are rules that did not apply from this rule list up above. And in this case, there was only one that did not apply. So there was one broken rule. So therefore, we're going to use this row. Now, in the situation where the strip is blue, because it's the intersection that meets up here, if the strip returns a blue, we want to immediately release the button. I'm not sure if there's a time that you have to pay attention for this, but like generally, if you like, what you want to tell your expert is, okay, let's hold down Romeo, and if it's blue, you immediately release it. I'm not sure what the time period that it gives you, but I just want you to make sure that you do that immediately. So we'll pay attention for blue. Now, this is probably the part where it's a little confusing. Otherwise, refer to the variable corresponding to the strip color and the number of rules broken by the button to obtain a digit from 0 through 5. And we're going to release the button when this digit is present on the bomb timer, not counting leading zeros. So, let's take a look at what this means. So, this first table, all this does for us is it gives us the color that we want to immediately release the button with. It's effectively our ignore color, because there is cases where it will simply give no cell, no color to work with. It does that in every single one of them. So, in the case where we hit blue, we simply do not care about these rules. Otherwise, in this situation, what we're going to do is whatever color we get on the strip, we're then going to look at the rule corresponding to the color that is the 1 position, because that's the number of broken rules that we have. And then we're going to follow that rule. We're going to get a digit that's in the 0 through 5 range, and we need to modulo 6 if it's above it, of course. And then we need to release it at that specific time. Now, I believe the specific leading zeros case is if you get the number 0, you can't do like a 0, 1, for example. It has to be like the last digit is a 0. I would advise simply just making it easy. Just do the last digit is a 0, or last digit is 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. It just makes it easy, personally speaking. And also, you can hold buttons. You should be fine. So, but this is the important part. So we're going to hold down Romeo, this top right Romeo first. And then whichever condition we get, we need to release it at a specific time. And if the variable is a letter that you get, you need to take its alphabetic position. I will say, I would highly recommend knowing your alphabetic positions by now. I will let you know what they are, because I have them in my head. Otherwise, going forward, I'm just going to tell you what the answer is, effectively. So, we have one broken rule. These are each of the different rules that we can apply depending on the colored switch. Of course, blue will not apply in this case, because if we have a blue, we simply release it immediately. So let's take a look at what we get. So let's hold top right. We get a white. The condition for this one is the number that we're going to get is the earliest occurring adjacent label alphabetically. So from this position, the earliest occurring adjacent label alphabetically is a alpha. Now, this alphabetic position is a 1, so therefore, all we simply need to do is release it at a 1, which I'm going to do right here. I know I could probably do that there, but there we go. And as we can see now, one of the LEDs is lit up, so therefore that condition was correct. So, you're not specifically looking for, like this, in this bottom part, the broken rules is the number that you look at, and the color of the LED strip is the list you effectively look at. It doesn't explain it that particularly well, but the only purpose this table serves is for the immediate release button. So don't get those confused. Now, since we're done with Romeo, let's take a look at Sierra's conditions. So let's go up here. Let's do this again. This button is white, so we're going to be taking a look at the white label rules, or the white button rules. The serial number contains label or any adjacent label. Let's take a look. So we have a Charlie. Charlie is adjacent to Sierra, so therefore this rule is true. The label is within 6 letters of the last letter of the password. So the last letter of the password was chalk. Is it within 6 letters of a kilo? Is the Sierra within 6 letters? No, it is not, because kilo is in position 11 and Sierra is in position 19. They are 7 apart, actually. No. Excuse me, 8 apart. Okay. They are 8 apart, not within 6 letters. And within 6 letters goes both ways, by the way. I don't know if it loops around to the like the other side of the alphabet, but I would imagine it would have to in some cases. So just bear that in mind. The serial number contains the number of labels on the module that occur later than the label alphabetically. So the serial number contains the number of labels on the module that occurred later in the module alphabetically. So what we're trying to look for is from Sierra, how many of them, how many letters on the module, on the button, the entire thing, occurred later than Sierra. And in this case, it's actually 0. Nothing comes later because this is 1, this is 3, this is 4, this is 8, this is 11, this is 12, this is 18, and this is 17. Nothing goes past 19. So is there a 0 in the serial number? No, there is not. So I'm also going to mark these in red, as these ones do not apply to us. And at least 2 adjacent buttons are the same color. At least 2 adjacent buttons are the same color. It doesn't have to be the same as the one that we're doing, like the color that we're currently on. There are 2 buttons that do at least give the same color, so therefore this rule is true. So now we have 2 broken rules this time around. So we're going to do 8 and then 2. So now if we happen to get the yellow strip to flash on the mod, we're going to release it immediately. Otherwise, we're going to be looking at the 2, the 2, and the 2. Let's take a look here. And it is important to note that this module does care about the number of unsolved modules. It does care about it, and it does calculate it when you hold the button. So be careful with this. So let's take a look. All right, so we're looking for yellow. We get red, the number of distinct adjacent button colors. Now, distinct specifically refers to if a color simply occurs. So in this case, we have a yellow that occurs, that's 1. That's 1 color that occurs. We have a red that occurs, that's 2. We have a blue that occurs, that's 3. We have another blue that occurs, but since blue has already been counted, we do not count this. We still count it as 3 and not 4 because that's not 4 distinct colors. So we're now going to release this on a 3. So let's wait for the 3 to come around. And just like that, that's good to go. Perfect. So now, that's the Sierra dealt with. These can be done in any order, but bear in mind, so I'm just doing it in reading order for the sake of simplicity, just making my mind easier. So, this is how this mod works. So let's continue on. And our last 2 buttons are going to be using the blue rules. Let's take a look here. We're going to look at Delta first. The label occurs immediately before or after any letter of the password alphabetically. Chalk exists. The Charlie is immediately before this label. So therefore this rule does actually apply. Next up, 2 or more indicators are present. Well, first off, let's even check that that's true. Yes, that is true. And no indicator label contains the label. We need to check for no indicator label containing Delta. There's a TRN and there's a Mike Sierra Alpha. This is also true. Perfect. The label and the first letter of the password are both odd or both even positioned. So the label of the first letter, the label, in this case being the Delta, and the first letter of the password, which is Charlie, are both odd or even positioned. In this case, Charlie and Delta are 3 and 4 respectively, so therefore this is not true. And finally, the button is on the same row or column as the last letter of the password. The last letter of the password is a kilo. We're going to check from Delta, is the button on the same row or column as kilo? In this case, it is not. So therefore, this rule is also false. So we have got 2 broken rules this time around. We're going to use 8. We're going to wait. We're going to see for Yeldo to exist. But we're going to be using the 2 rule for the other groups if we happen to land on it. So let's take a look at yellow. So let's do this. Please hit a yellow. We do not. The number of unsolved modules, another one. This is the only one that's here. So therefore, we're going to release it when another 1 comes around. I don't know if this counts, but I'm not willing to take that chance. I'm simply going to release it when there's a 1 in the last digit, and I'd recommend you do the same as well. I mean, it would probably have to count, in my opinion. So, so this is also a blue as well. This one's also really easy. We know that the button is not on the same row or column because it's kilos over here, and we can just immediately check that off. But we need to check the other 3. Does Quebec occur in any of the indicators? It does not, so therefore this one returns true. The label occurs immediately before or after any letter of the password alphabetically. Chalk. We have a Charlie, we have a Hotel, we have an Alpha, a Lima, and a Kilo. None of them come close to the Quebec. So no, this rule is actually not true this time around. The label and the first letter of the password are both odd or both even position. Quebec is a 17 in this alphabetic position, and Charlie is a 3. They both have the same parity, therefore this rule is true. So we actually still happen to get 2 broken rules, just 2 different broken rules in this case. So let's do this again. So with the bottom right, we're going to be waiting for a yellow to appear. If it appears, we immediately release it. Otherwise, we look at these 3 conditions down here. It's a white. Number of unsolved modules is a 1. And just like that is a solved module. So it's a little bit tricky with its wording, but overall, what we're going to do is we're checking for the rule list. We're checking for the rule list of the specific button color that you're looking at, determining how many broken rules exist, using this table to determine which color you'll immediately release on. It's kind of like a unicorn case if you think about it in a way. And then we're also using it to determine which rules we would apply depending on which strip we get. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. It is nice that it actually gives you time to prep for conditions, for example, where unsolved modules are happening. But for the most part, it's actually not that bad to do. The wording itself, it's a bit peculiar, I will admit, but it's also just something that is actually not that bad and hard to understand. It just is a little bit interesting. So let's take a look at one more example. Let's see what we can spell here. Let's take a look at Juliet. Enjoy. Fjord. Jax. Jerky. Joust. Juicy. Jumbo. Kanji. Ouija board. Ryoja. And Upjet. Nope. Let's take a look at golf. Angry. Cargo. 8. Fudge. Fungi. Gassed. Glaze. Glyph. Naws. Oh, you bastard. Guard. I don't think guard was there. I don't think there was even a uniform to begin with. Let's wait. Damn pacing events. Guard. That's a no. Hinge, no. Image, no. Omega, no. Young, and Zygon. It might honestly be Quebec here. Hike, nope. Kibla. It's Kibla. Our word is Kibla here. A very interesting word that I've never heard of. But we have Q, we've got Quebec, we've got India, we have Bravo, Lima, and Alpha. This is our word, so therefore we have Papa, Golf, Juliet, and Victor that we need to be holding and releasing. Let's start with the Papa. And this time we actually are able to visit the yellow rules as well, which is perfect. So the serial number contains label or any other adjacent label. Serial number contains the label itself or any adjacent label. Let's take a look. Kilo 76 Juliet Delta 0. Kilo Juliet and Delta. None of those letters are present, so therefore this rule does not apply. The label is within 6 letters of the last letter of the password. No, it is not. That's a very far away one. So no, that is not true. The serial number contains the number of labels on the module that serial number contains the number of modules on the label that occur later than the label alphabetically. So from Papa, how many labels occur later than Papa? And in this case, there's only 2, which is Quebec and a Victor. Quebec being 17 instead of 16, and Victor being 22 instead of 16. So we're looking if the serial number contains a 2. It does not, so therefore this rule also does not apply. At least 2 adjacent buttons are the same color. That is true. The 2 reds are indeed the same, so therefore this is true. Okie dokie. So we have 3 broken rules this time around, and we have a last digit of the serial number of 0. If blue happens to show up, we simply want to release it immediately. Otherwise, we're going to take a look at these 3 other conditions here. So let's take a look. Let's hold it down. We get a yellow. The earliest occurring label on a button, that is the same color as the held button. So in this case, the earliest occurring label on a button that is the same color as the held button. I don't know if this allows it to refer to itself, but in this case, of the buttons that are the same as the held button, it would be Papa. And we would need to... Oh, thankfully, actually, it doesn't even matter because the Victor we would do 22 modulo 6, and it would actually go over the 16, which would then mean our answer is 4. I believe this would be, it doesn't specifically state that it's referring to another one, but it's still our answer is 4, which is good. So if it was 16, for example, we would do modulo by 6, and we would get 4. If it was 22, we simply are adding 6 here, so it would get the same result, effectively. It doesn't state if it's a different button. That's what the wording of that is weird. In this case, we happen to get really lucky that it's the same answer for both of them, but keep that in mind that that's not made clear. So, anyways, let's continue on. Let's take a look at golf. Actually, let's take a look at Victor, because this is the same button color, so we'll just get that out of the way. Serial number contains the labels, the label or any adjacent labels. Does it contain a Bravo, Juliet, or Victor? It does contain a Juliet, so therefore this rule is true. The label is within 6 letters of the last letter of the password. A 22 plus 6 would get us to 28. This is also true, because assuming that the way that this mod works is wrapping around, 22 plus 6 would get us to 28, and then we would modulo by 26 would be 2, which is a Bravo. It is within 6 letters of the last letter of the password, which in this case was alpha. So I believe that this is true. The serial number contains the number of labels on the module that occur later than alphabetically. So, Victor doesn't have anything else that occurs alphabetically after it, so therefore this is going to be a 0. That is also present in it, yes. So the serial number contains the number of letters that come after Victor, which in this case is 0. And at least 2 buttons are the same color, which is true as well. So there's no broken rules this time around, so instead we're going to be using 0 here. And we're instead going to be looking at white for the rule set, for releasing immediately, rather. So let's do bottom right. And we release immediately because it was white. Perfect, just like that. Victor is now done. Let's take a look at our 2 yellow buttons now. So, the label occurs between the first and last letter of the password alphabetically. So with Keebler, we want to check if these buttons are in between Alpha and Quebec. Now, thankfully for both of these are both actually going to return true, because because Golf is between Alpha and Quebec, and Juliet is between Alpha and Quebec. So both of these will be true. So, for the next one, the password contains all adjacent labels. So in this case, with Golf, for this first one, does Keebler contain an Alpha, Lima, in India? It does, actually, in this time around. It will not be the same for the Juliet because of the Victor, but in this case, for Golf, this is true. Label is in the same half of the alphabet as the last letter of the serial number. The last letter of the serial number is a delta. Delta is in the same half. In this case, you'd be looking through Alpha through Mike and November through Zulu for the half of the alphabet. So in this case, Golf is indeed in the same half as Delta, so therefore this rule is also true. And finally, the serial number contains the position of the button in column order. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to assume that it's referring to column order as left to right, going top down. So in this case, it would be a 4. Does it contain a 4? It does not this time around. It also doesn't contain an 8 going forward as well. So this one will be false. So we have one broken rule here. This time around, we actually are going to be guaranteed to have to release it on a specific condition and not release it immediately because we hit a blank cell here. So we do one broken rule for every single one of these. So let's hold Golf down, and we get blue, which is the first letter of the password. The first letter was a Quebec because it was Keebler, however you pronounce it. So we're going to do 17 modulo 6, and this gets us a 5. And just like that, that's good to go. And now let's take a look at Juliet for our last letter here. Okie dokie. So we said that the label occurred between them alphabetically. The password does not have all adjacent labels this time around. The label is indeed in the same half as the delta, so that is true. And the serial number contains the position of the button in column order. Assuming that it's like this, it would need to be 8, so therefore this is false. So therefore now, instead of 1 broken rule, it's 2 broken rules. And we want to avoid red this time around. Perfect. So if we can, or not even avoid red, we want red to happen, because that would be just nice for us. So let's take a look. Let's hold middle right and pray for a red. We got blue. The difference between the smallest and largest numerical serial number digits. So let's see if we can grab that here. The difference between the smallest and largest, in this case, would be a 7 and a 0. 7 minus 0, in this case, is 7. Modulating that by 6 would be a 1. Let's release it when there's a 1. And just like that is a solved module. Hope that clears anything up with this one, because this one is a little bit of a peculiar case. There's some rules that do make sense and some that don't, in my opinion. But based off of logical deduction, I was able to solve the mods and hopefully explain how this mod works. As always, thank you guys for watching. Remember to stay crazy, stay cool, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye!